3:30, so we can go ahead and get started. Would you like to introduce yourself and give us an overview of your budget?
Good afternoon, counselors. My name is Ken Towsley, Director of Code Enforcement, and we're here to discuss the 18-19 budget for code enforcement.
You still got the same question? All right, so we're going to go ahead and open it up for questions, starting with Counselor Rudd.
Sure.
Pitch first?
Yeah, nope.
No?
No, you talked to us enough over the last.
Yeah. We all know what he does. Everybody's bothered.
On the page 132 where you talk about the activity indicators, could you describe a little bit the changes from the current year to the proposed year?
You want to...
In particular, I was thinking, when I was looking at certificates of compliance, certificates of inspection,
Yep.
and the rental registry activity. And in my head, I was expecting to see a big increase in various, but there is actually a decrease.
So our certificate of compliance, the numbers that we use, those are obviously for our 3 families and above. We've had multiple conversations over those.
Yep.
Those are based on what are my projection on what are going to be issued for that budget year, based on what is due for the 18-19 year, and then throwing on some properties that, a percentage that will receive their certificate even though it's beyond the 5 years in that budget cycle. Certificate of inspection, those are very...
On the certificate of compliance, is 375 a third of the total number? That
It's not a third, no.
Because, it's not much variation when you go backwards. Like, the year before, it was 400. The year before, it was 396. So if I were to add those 3 together, that doesn't come close. I guess I'm just trying to understand, because previously, it seemed pretty clear there was going... I understood it as there would be an increase this year, so that over the next 3 years, we would issue certificates of compliance on all 3 families and up.
Correct. When I submitted these activity indicators, we have not changed the ordinance yet to change it from 5 to 3.
You did this before all the other.
So you have to add 2 more years to get close to that 75% we've talked about in the past, Counselor.
Given the 375 this year, and given the changes that have happened since, what would you expect this indicator to have to be the next 2 years?
If we're going to go to 3 years, probably on the lines of 500, based upon the proper applications. The owners are going to apply in a timely manner, perform their inspections. Some of it is dependent upon the violations found in a property, but in the past, we've talked about how we've cited everything that we see. We're gearing more towards the health and safety violations within a property. So my belief is that more properties will receive their certificate of compliance because they'll be code compliant with the health and safety issues.
Okay, receiving it. So you would say 500 and 500 for the next 2 years, or is it staggered and gets even bigger, like 500 next year?
I can definitely get those numbers to you based on what we have existing, but I would guesstimate the first year we go to the 3-year program, I would say right around 500. And then depending on who's received and how we separate those ones that are at a 4-year period or a 3-year period, how we're going to stagger them over a 2-year period as well. We'll have to do some math so you don't hurt somebody who just got it. Might give them a little bit of leeway versus somebody who's got it 5 years ago.
If you could share the targets for the 3-year period, I would appreciate that a lot. And then could you just talk a moment about the rental registry line as well, and how the passage of the recent law may change the way you would expect this to be?
Yep. So once again, these numbers were proposed prior to the legislation passed. My guess is that these numbers will hopefully increase. We're basing it on the fact that these are that 32% of compliance rate. Once this starts, we'll have a better understanding come July, August timeframe based on the applications we receive. The goal is to have better numbers after 6 months based upon an initial sending out of, we're looking at about 1,000 letters every 2 to 3 weeks for those who have not applied in the past 2 to 3 years. Those are the targets that we're going to start in the beginning.
On the rental registry function, could you add an activity that somehow showed the inspections, right? Is one comprehensive inspection now? It would be like exterior, interior, everything all at once, or is it?
That's the goal, that we will do interior, exterior all at one time.
Because this line would only show the number who are approved, right? So in theory, there could be many more who applied who don't pass.
Correct.
So could you add in the future an activity indicator that would show the number of inspections that were actually conducted, whether they passed or failed?
Yep, and I will break that out. That is part of the inspections relative to, it's not listed there, but when we have exterior violations, those are considered complaints. So there's inspections based on the complaints. So I can break out the rental registry inspections separate.
Okay. Yes, please. And again, if you can do the 3-year plan for what you'd expect the activity to be in order to handle the load, that would also be appreciated.
Not a problem, Counselor.
Yeah, done.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions yet, but I'm going to make a statement, though. With all of the debate over the validity of or the need for rental registry, the need for warrants for inspection, you had the unfortunate outcome of the fire on Fifth Street, where the house, I understand, may have been listed as an owner-occupied, so it may qualify as a questionable or unlawful rental. A place where so many family members passed away because the fire alarms were not functionable. Had that person had a rental registry certificate and we had access, to inspect, chances are the fire alarms would have been functional, and someone may have been awakened by the alarm going off. I just want to make a point that's my absolutely shameless plug for the value of the legislation that we passed. I opened the floor for debate, but that's a trap. I wouldn't go for it. Thank you.
I'd like to talk to you about the revenues, page 7.
I would go for it. I was just going to let him.
Didn't think anybody was going to talk about the money, yeah?
Can I get that water?
No, I just, and the only reason this popped in my head is you just said that you would propose this prior to the changes that came before the council on that. So I'm looking at the numbers. Do you think that there's anything appreciable going to change here? And are we going to? I know it's going to end up in the general fund anyways. But do you think that there's going to be more coming in than actually here? And if so, where would you see it coming in?
I think if anything, Counselor, would be the rental registry fees based on the new ordinance, and then us having a different approach on going after those non-applicants. That's a possibility of revenue increase. But other than that, I don't see any other revenue increases other than what I've submitted.
The building and property based on people, no?
The inspection fees, these are, and when I proposed this, I wasn't aware that the ones that go on the taxes aren't part of the revenue. So this is just cash receipts. So our inspection fees,
Okay.
This is solely cash received. We averaged, I think last year it was $43,000 onto the taxes of properties for inspection fees.
Okay.
Sorry, can you repeat that? You added 43,000?
So when we perform exterior inspections and pass the comply by date, we have performed a service. We charge that property owner $45 for a single family, $55 for a 2-family and above for failure to comply. And then if they don't pay us in a cash or check within the year, it gets rolled out of their taxes because it is a service that we perform.
Okay.
Do you think that
Thank you.
service fee reflects the true cost to your department?
And no, I do not.
Low, right? It's too low.
Yes.
Was that one of the changes that you have in that you've proposed?
The initial letter I sent you, Counselor, it had those changes in there. The new letter we're submitting is just solely the MVB.
Okay.
Counselor Green?
My question is on page 134, The professional services line. Can you just walk me through what that entails?
That is going to be for our grass cutting contractor. We have a contract every 3 years. That I think it's $235,000 that we spend right down to the last penny every year. We go out and site the properties, vacant structures, vacant lots, and then either we'll send our contractor or our summer crew to cut and clean those properties. Matter of fact, what's the
Professional services.
Yeah, there's a page with a total breakdown, and it's all the SURA payroll, and plus some consulting engineers cost. The
Also-
grass cutting is up in a functional 5402.
347, probably.
347 has the breakdown of
It
all
has the
the
breakdown of the
professional
service.
services. It's in a different line.
272.
Operating supplies and expenses, right. Okay,
Okay.
you good?
Yep. I'll take that back. That's going to be our 415 Sura line, and then other Peterson Guadagnola, who excuse me, performs our elevator review process for construction projects in the city.
Okay, thank
So
you.
Mary, is that from the handout that you gave us?
Sora.
Okay.
Yes, all the employees there listed, that is who's charged to the codes department, just salaries only. What's also charged in those 415 line are the benefits.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, I have a question about on page 133, the administrative aid positions. It says that there are 8. If I can recall, these were positions that were cut before from the last administration. Is that correct?
The administrative aid counselor?
Yes.
No, we have.
It's currently 8 right now. So are all 8?
No, 5 are filled.
Okay.
3 have been cut over the previous couple of years.
So 3 were cut.
Yep.
Okay.
And that's maxed out. We're going to stay with 5.
Okay. So should the number be changed to 5, or why did you guys leave it at 8?
No, we have 8 positions in there for the administrative aid. 5 are funded, 3 are unfunded. We keep those titles there because we need them for civil service in case down the line we want the title. If we get rid of the title, it's very difficult to get it back.
Okay.
While we're on the positions, I know you've walked me through the plan to have these zones with 640 properties where the code got directed. Is there a way you could describe how, like, the 21 people who will have a zone where they show up on this?
So what we have, those inspectors would be the structural and new construction examiner electrical. We have 11 of those inspectors. Housing inspectors, we have a total of 8 of them. And then we have what are called SPCC, Syracuse Property Conservation Code inspectors, which are on the 415 line. Those are SURA employees. Those will be transferred to the civil service line after the list is exhausted at the end of May to get them off SURA to put them on civil service. They'll be eligible to take the exam after that time. So between those 5 SPCC inspectors, the 11 structural new construction, and the 8 housing inspectors, 2 of the structural and new construction will perform commercial only construction inspections. And that will leave me with 21 total inspectors broken down into the city. So it'll be 9 structural, 8 housing, 5, which is 22, so it'll be 4 total, 4 of the SPCC. So you'll have 21 total inspectors throughout the city.
Thank you. The the two become housing inspectors, or they become structural new?
They will become housing inspectors. It's the same job title, in theory, the same job description, just one's civil service, one's not. We changed that title. Any new hires for the housing inspectors went civil service 3 or 4 years ago to start getting people off of SURA.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Yeah, I was just curious. When we were talking about the, I know this was made pre-rental registry passing. When we discussed the success of interior rental registry, a lot of that was the outreach to the landlords. What are your plans for outreach to landlords about making them aware of the changes? And do you feel you need any more funding for that, or is there any way the council could help support that in any way?
I think our biggest thing is going to be is, other than the shameless plug that Councilor Bay had about the fire, we need to utilize the existing community groups that we have, the TNTs, the neighborhood watches. I have been in contact with Tony Borelli. Inspectors or myself will be heading to these neighborhood watch meetings throughout the city over the next few months. We'll be attending the TNT meetings. That doesn't mean landlords attend them. Some do.
Right.
Obviously, your help as counselors, district counselors will help. But we will be sending letters out to landlords that the legislation has changed, that you need to apply. If you have applied, thank you. You're not due for another 2 or 3 years. But there will be no violations attached to that initial letter. That's what hopefully we'll get to them first. And then once July hits, we'll send out other letters that, you haven't applied, we're waiting on your application. Try to work with them that way, and then once we have no communication with them, no applications, then we'll go the violation route.
Okay. And my other question is kind of concerned to resources. Do you feel you have enough with everything with all the increase in that's hoped for with interior inspections? Would you feel like it's an avenue worth investigating to seek more resources, or do you feel like you're...
I think I'm in a good place now, Counselor, just based on what I'm expecting. In a perfect world, I'd get the other 62%, 68% of landlords applying on July 1st because they're going to follow the law. And then I'd have an issue. I don't question that. But I think based on my expectations, we're good to handle it. If we do get an influx, I think it's something that could be addressed internally, utilizing those 2 inspectors that are going to do commercially if we need to. But I think for the most part, based on numbers, based on what we're looking for, the fact that we're not doing as many complaints inspections as we have in the past based on our triaging program now, that we are doing outreach with landlords, letting them know that there's violations. They are reaching back out to us that they fixed it. We'll do one stop, verify that it's been done, and that's the extent of our inspections. So the time for the inspectors is going to increase based on the less complaints that we are overseeing.
Okay.
Thank you.
I just,
Thanks for coming, Counselor.
glad to be here. I just left the dentist. That's good.
I appreciate the comment.
One of the things in the breakdown is it says like $1,000 for user wood. I assume it's Usherwood. Do you know what that specifically is for? I mean, is it rental? Are we renting equipment or?
Usherwood, I believe, is part of our microfiche
Okay.
deal.
All right.
I know I get that once a year on PeopleSoft.
Yeah, okay. All right. Yeah. Other than the other questions I had, I think have been answered with the numbers based on the new legislation, the fact that this was done prior to. All right, dentist, what do you got?
Are there unfunded positions in your,
There are vacant unfunded positions, yes.
are there any funded vacant?
There will be no funded vacant positions in my budget.
How many codes officers are you gonna?
We have 24 inspectors.
Are they assigned to specific, like the building guy, this guy?
So we have, the current breakdown of it is we have structural and new construction that deal with basically everything, permit inspections, CFCs, complaints if need be, usually a building without a permit. I have housing inspectors that deal with our tenant complaints and our exterior rental registry. In the future, there'll be 2 of those structural that will deal solely with commercial inspections for projects, and the rest will do all other inspections throughout the city.
So right now they're all doing them all, but down the road too, we'll be focusing on just commercial.
2 will solely deal with commercial construction projects.
When's that taking effect?
We're working on numbers now, hopefully by July 1, perhaps sooner.
Will that require change in status for those guys?
No.
Okay.
Thank you.
If no further, you got,
Can you speak a little bit about the backlog of code? The code violations eventually go to court, right? And there's a backlog, and that's part of the reason why we're we're making the MVB. So what's the current backlog? How do you anticipate that backlog to shrink with the implementation of MVB? Do you have any timing targets on that?
My latest guesstimate is approximately, I guess you could say, 1,000 cases that have been referred to the law department. My belief is with the MVB, a lot of those cases that we deal with will be addressed on new violations starting on July 1. Hopefully we have this MVB up and running, and then any adjudication will fall through the MVB and not through our law department. Any of the more serious health and safety violations that we come across will still utilize our law department to go to court. Over the course of time, my belief is that number will dwindle significantly as we're handling them through the MVB. And once again, our law department will handle our most severe cases.
What do you think would be a reasonable number of cases to have in the law department after we reach new normal?
I love 0. That
0.
means everybody's compliant.
Oh, okay. Is there a real number? Is there like a real world number?
As low as they can get it,
I mean, if we can drop this by 25 to 30% every 6 months, I think we're in a positive manner. It's not going to happen overnight, Counselor, but I think it's, I don't think it's a stretch to say 20-25% in that first 6 months, and then based upon what we're getting through the adjudication process of the MVB, it can increase or decrease. But my goal is to have just, major health violations going to court.
Earlier in the previous hearing, the question was asked, like, where MVB is at, the Municipal Violations Bureau is actually going to fall under the Finance Department.
Correct.
So could you speak a little about your collaboration with Finance to get it set up, and any concerns do you have any concerns about kind of the structural alignment of it not being in the Codes Department? Does it?
No, I strongly 100% behind the fact that it should fall under another department, completely away from code enforcement or zoning or the law. I mean, it should be a separate entity. All we're going to do is cite the properties, and when we have no compliance, no communications, we'll write a ticket and then ship it off to the adjudication board, and then we're out of it. I mean, there should be no input.
The police department writes parking tickets, and then Finance processes with the parking bureau. That's the way.
Correct.
You'll write the ticket, and then the Finance department will process it. Okay.
Whenever you're ready, I got.
Do you have a question?
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah. With the 1,000 open cases or 1,000 that you've referred to law, how many of those would you actually see? I mean, I think you said maybe like 25% would actually still be referred to law then, or how? I don't want to. Yeah, I'm just. How many of those 1,000 would you say would still have been, if we had the Municipal Violations Bureau? How many of those currently open cases would have actually been referred to our law department? And I know, I'm sure you don't have specific, but just ballpark. Half of them. 25%. All 1,000.
No, all 1,000, definitely not all 1,000. But to make our current ordinances work, I would say that we would utilize that MVB more than the law department. A failure to apply for a rental registry right now is not a priority for the law department to go after. There's other issues that they have that we need to get addressed, through the judge. So all of those ones that we've referred to law will go through the MVB process. My guess is probably 20 to 25% of that 1,000 would probably still go to the law department until we have the MVB up and running and it's a fine-tuned machine. Ideally, and you hear a lot about Rochester, but I think the number is four cases last year went to court out of probably 6,000 complaints that they received. So we're not going to get there this budget year, but I believe that it'll start dwindling down the amount that, and then using the resources of our law department in a better, more efficient manner is going to work.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No.
That, back to the investigators, back to the investigators, does that 22 you said include the reimbursement from the county?
That is one of the inspectors, yes.
Okay, so that counts in the 22.
Yes. And they will still perform those inspections. We're not eliminating that position, that job.
Of the 1,000 that you say, I'm not going to get on that, but of the 1,000, is it 1,000 separate structures we're talking, or is it maybe 500 structures cited twice, 3 times?
When I use the term case, it could be multiple complaints on one property. It could be just 1,000 properties. We do have those properties that have complaints open, say 2016 and again in 2017 for different violations. Say a 2-family, for example, the first floor has a broken stove, second floor has no smoke detectors, cited at different times. Those 2 have been referred to the law department. So it counts as 2 separate cases even though it's the same structure.
Okay, yeah.
Again, in an earlier hearing with the land bank, they were talking about the cost per cutting grass, and they were like, oh, we do it less, and they were kind of saying your cost per yard is like $54, and I'm not going to examine that number, but do you have like a cost per inspection, like cost per rental registry inspection, or cost per certificate of compliance in like a similar manner to the way you may have a cost per yard cutting measure?
I don't have a cost. I mean, I would break it down as what does it cost for an inspector per hour? What does it cost the city to pay that inspector per hour? Because each structure is going to be different in the matter of how long we're going to spend as an inspection. A property in Winkworth that we have to inspect may not take as long as a property down on Seymour Street. And that's just the reality. So I can't say per inspection is going to cost X. It's a matter of time spent by an inspector on a property.
Have you ever, at any point in time, so you contract for yard work. Have you ever considered contracting for inspections?
No, I have not.
No. Is there a basic explanation for why it's not appropriate to contract for an inspection as opposed to like cutting the grass? Cutting jobs. Is that, yeah, fair enough.
I think we just got done paying.
That's why I asked the question.
15 grand to CSCA. We don't have to pay it this year out of the settlement, so move on.
So you recently implemented a practice of having 2 inspectors focusing on one quadrant in the city.
Yes.
Are you guys going to filter that throughout the city?
Yep.
soon?
We had a meeting with the I team on Friday. There will be 2 of the structural and new construction inspectors going up on that north side to next to those 2 properties that our 2 housing inspectors are on, and then 2 housing inspectors will be going to the south side of the city. Elmwood is one neighborhood, and a part of Brighton.
Okay.
Those 2 will start down there at the same time.
Okay. And has it proven to save us on costs and time?
The one thing I can say is that the 2 inspectors that have done the pilot program, 38% of their complaints that they've received have been addressed, health and safety issues, have been addressed by landlords without us pursuing any additional inspections, any other letters, violation notices, anything. So I think that's a huge improvement to what we've done in the past, where we've gone, cited, sent out letters, and then harass. Here, working with landlords, working with tenants to understand what our process is, shows a huge increase from what we've done in the past. That 38%, that number shocked me. which in a good way.
Just under, let's see what it is. It's the motor equipment repair supplies and services. There was a, like $1,700.
$1,700.
Yeah. Did we get rid of some equipment? Did we
No.
get rid of a car? I don't.
That we have, per CSEA agreement, there's one vehicle that the inspectors share throughout the year.
Okay.
And there was an accident with that vehicle. And it cost us $1,700 to get it repaired.
Okay.
So we had to pay the police department to fix it.
Okay.
Do you have a question, Councilor Rowe?
I do, and I forgot it. So when in all of our conversations talking about capacity and certificates of compliance, you talked some about how you might be able to comply almost like statistically, because the nature of a certificate of compliance is that they're buildings with 3 or more units. So with large units, you may not have to inspect all those units. Could you talk a little bit about that, just because I think that's I thought that was a very effective way.
We're discussing how we want to handle our larger project, our larger buildings that have, we're not sure of an exact number to start with, but perhaps picking 20% of the units, our selection of the 20%, going in and seeing what the status of these apartments are. It's my belief, and I've done enough of these inspections when I was an electrical inspector to know that we start walking into 10, 15 units in a high rise, and all 10, 15 are in great shape. I could be pretty confident that the other 85 of them are going to be just as good shape. The other discussion is perhaps we do over a 3-year period 33% of the units a year. Discussions with MBD regarding when they bring in Section 8 inspections. Perhaps utilize their paperwork to say that these are code compliant, utilizing that. Talking with the university, Syracuse University, they have their fire prevention unit up at the university, goes through the same training that my inspectors do. They have the same certifications. They go through their dorms and apartments more often than we do. Perhaps it's to get a letter from them stating that they're code compliant. So to meet the demand with the additional rental registries, we're looking at other ways that we're going to ensure that these are code compliant, but what ways can we do that going forward?
Along those lines, do you think there's ways that you could use like statistical sampling in the 1 and 2 family non-owner occupied houses in order to more strategically allocate your resources and have with the acknowledgement that it might be hard to do all the properties, but that you can still do it effectively?
I think I need a baseline of interior inspections first before I'd be able to do that. I mean, I'm talking to my inspectors who've been around 20, 30 years, who've dealt with Brighton Towers, who've dealt with the university. They can tell me that through their experience, they haven't run into the problems. I don't have that same experience with our 1 and 2s because we haven't been able to get into these 1 and 2s since 2010, and that was only for about a year. We did some interior inspections, but I don't have a true baseline to say that, yeah, these are going to be something that we'd want to miss. But my guesstimate on the amount of time for a 1 and 2 family inspection should be no more than an hour for a 2 unit. A half hour to walk into a single family should be more than enough time to see if there's smoke detectors, carbon monoxides, operable windows. Things may change down the road in regards to lead and things like that, but for the time being, with what we're talking about today, I believe our time will be allocated accordingly to deal with these 1 and 2s.
You're all done?
Are all the...
Right.
No, I'm not making up questions, but we do have time, and he's here. But
Council, I do. We do plan review as well, and we do construction. Right. So.
All right.
Done?
I mean, I do think codes is a opportunity for us to raise revenue, right? And so do they.
That's why they did that.
Ask him the revenue question.
Yeah, next one.
Yeah. How much money with an MVB, how much money do you think we can generate over the next 3 years, over the next 5 years because of these changes? Like, will we be able to use this to penalize people who are not compliant and raise money to help fix the city's fiscal problems?
Well, I think Stephanie and I have worked on trying to come up with a number. It is very hard the first year of an MVB to determine where we're going to be. By the time this starts up and running, you're probably not looking at a judgment till the end of this year, calendar year. That's just the reality of it. So then at that point, you have to file judgments, and then our collections agents will do it. So a rough estimate, maybe $100,000 the first year. And hopefully going forward, ideally, I'm not a money grab. Ideally, I would have loved to say zero because we're compliant. But going forward, the key is going to be is where are we with the judgments? We're pushing the state legislation to change the housing judgments to allow us to put them on their taxes. Right now, New York State does not allow housing judgments to be put on taxes. It has to be a judgment. You have to go after them. Problem with judgments is single entity LLCs. All that you have is the property. So our collections agents in the law department are doing a fantastic job for those properties that were able to have judgments on them. They're restraining rents. If they own multiple properties under the same name, they can't sell them. They're putting liens on them. So there are tools out there. But the key is going to be, is it economically feasible to ensure that we're collecting judgments on a continual basis at the $300, $600 limit that the MVB fines will be presented to you in the next couple of weeks. Those are things that we're going to have to look at going down the road. Ideally, we would love to have them on the taxes. Then the revenue will be coming into the general fund on a continual basis.
Is there any legislation that has been moved anywhere or submitted?
The state has presented this legislation multiple times over the last 10 years and has been shot down by the Assembly.
The Assembly.
Yep, and it's not our local. It's Senator DeFrancisco, Assemblyman Magnarelli, and Assemblywoman Hunter has not been part of this yet, but they all support this. It's the downstate assemblymen who have shot this down.
Okay.
I followed this for a few years, Counselor.
Can I roll that back for a second, Ken? Did you say that you have there's ability to withhold rents?
Rent restraints when we have housing judgments, yes.
Okay. I wasn't aware that was...
So basically
Those are the
city,
stop rents, right?
Nope, those are marshals collecting, the sheriff's department, The sheriff's department collects the rent from the tenants.
Only if the tenants call you and set it up, though.
No, this is separate from an escrow account that you're talking about, Counselor.
Because there's escrow accounts as well?
We have the ability to do escrow accounts. We don't do them, though.
Okay. What are the circumstances that lead to the rent withholding? I mean, what is the process, if you could walk me through it, kind of?
That would be a question for Karen Felice and Melinda Fays in the law department. They're the ones who go through that.
Okay. And what is the protocol for escrow?
Seeing that I've never set up an escrow account.
Okay.
I am going to Los Angeles to talk about that rent escrow account program that they have.
They've set up, yeah.
So I'm looking to get a lot more information on that.
Yeah, that came before the council, our first council meeting, but never came back. Is that what's happening? You're going out to LA to
Yeah,
explore the
we're
feasibility?
seeing that California is as close to New York in regards to. It isn't convenient, but I'm going out with the I-team, but to meet with their directors. We had a conference call with them to discuss this. It's very interesting how they go about doing it. And I think it's something that would be positive for the city going forward.
Great, thank you.
To do something like that, correct me if I'm wrong, we need some state legislation to do a home rule?
We would have to get with our attorneys in regards to that. I don't.
Whatever was proposed, I know that it was withdrawn because part of what was necessary to do it, we couldn't do it yet because we didn't have.
We may need enabling legislation from the Assembly and the Senate. I'm not sure, but I would speak to our attorneys about that to see what we would need to go forward.
So there's no legislation that we can change judgments to services, that you were providing a service for the city, and then the service is rolled back onto the tax roll?
Part of what we did 3 years ago, Counselor, was to assess those inspection fees for that reason.
Right.
That's the one thing, the biggest reason we assessed those inspection fees is that we were getting judgments, but the collection was slow. Or you had single entity LLCs that there was nothing to get from, or they would walk away from the property and become vacant. So we needed to do something that if we aren't getting them on the taxes, we found that the inspection fees, because we are performing that service, was the best avenue to go.
Right. So that rate needs to change.
So over the next few months, counselors will receive a lot of questions and may have their own concerns. Is it possible to get maybe bi-monthly updates on the status of what the 1 and 2 family rental, how that's going, how many we've done, what kind of results have we gotten.
After July? After the-
Well, excuse me, after July 1st. Sorry. Otherwise, you'll have 9 people calling you asking, so.
Wouldn't change how things are now, Counselor.
Yeah.
But I will,
We'll still call, but it'll be different.
I will set it up to
I
where,
put 3 calls in the can on Monday. I'm proud of that.
and one at 6 o'clock at night.
You appreciated it.
So bi-monthly reports on the rental registry
Doesn't
after,
have to be bi-monthly, but just what, you know, I think some updates to keep the counselors apprised.
after July 1st, once we start the process, I'll let the whole council know where we stand on it.
You should get one of those contracts where if you answer a phone call after 6, you get 4 hours of overtime.
Different union.
I'm a public servant, Counselor.
I know, and I appreciate it. You really have answered a lot of questions, and you have a hard job and an important job, and you do always give the answers when asked, so I appreciate that.
All right, so if no further questions, you didn't have opening remarks. Would you like closing remarks?
Drop the mic.
No,
Second that.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak in regards to what our office does. And as I've said to each of you before, anytime you want to stop by my office, we'll be more than happy to go more in depth of what our department does and how we handle things. I know I've had some good meetings with all of you. So thank you.
All right, thank you.